In our last nugget, we kind of laid a little bit of groundwork for understanding some basic computing concepts and units of measure and things like that. We're going to be, again, discussing all of those things in actual detail in an upcoming nugget, but for now, at least it gives us enough to move forward with understanding things such as servers. So we're going to understand here some of the hardware characteristics of a server. Generally speaking, they're more powerful than workstations, but not always, okay? I'm going to speak in mostly generalities here. I'm going to say that servers are more powerful than workstations, but the reality is some workstations are very powerful. Like high-end gaming machines, for example, might be more powerful than some servers. So I'm going to, again, just stick with the stereotype, if you will, of some of these various types of computers, and we'll get into some more details later on. The RAM in a server can be terabytes in size. We're going to again talk more about units of measures in the future, but they could potentially have huge amounts of RAM in them because they have to service multiple clients, and we'll get into that here as we go as well. They also might have more storage. Kind of depends on why you need the server, what the purpose of the server is. Some servers really mostly do processing, and they don't really need a lot of storage. They might just only need a few hundred megabytes, in fact, of storage. However, some others, the whole purpose of them is maybe something like a file server, where it stores everybody's files from that entire office on one server. Then that storage is going to be probably in at least the terabytes, if not the petabytes. It's going to be lots and lots of storage involved, lots and lots of RAM involved there as well. And then the processors, everything's more on a server, right? The processors, you're also going to have more of those. On a desktop computer, you might have a single processor. It might have multiple cores, like we talked about in our last nugget. But you might have, on a server, multiple processors, in other words, multiple form factors that are installed, but each one of those also has more cores. You might have dozens of processors in a single server. It can be very, very highly performing. These also get to be, by the way, really, really super expensive. All right. It might have a network interface card. We talked about that in our last nugget. Now, a network interface card for a server is rarely going to be wireless. Most, hardcore servers are going to be in a server room, kind of like what's pictured behind me here. And a lot of the servers here are going to be stored in racks. These are all in racks that you see behind me here. And a lot of the servers you just will then pull out, kind of like a drawer in a dresser. You can pull it out, and then you can look right down into it and replace various expansion components, such as adding in more RAM, adding an additional processor, things like this if you wanted to. And servers are also designed to have high uptime, so that most of them are designed to have what we call 5 nines. In other words, 99.999% of the time, they are up and running and turned on, and we don't have any unexpected shutdowns of those servers. So as such, you can actually replace RAM or processors on the fly in many cases, so that you don't even have to turn the computer off. It goes while it's on, okay? But that's, again, a server thing. Don't do that on your own computer, okay? You'll ruin it. But on servers, they're designed to be able to handle that kind of thing. Now, the form factor could be a number of different kinds of form factors. I'll show you a website here. We'll see some, for example. But you might have some that are kind of vertical like this, and, they just kind of stand up like that, vertically. That's a tower case, usually, for servers. You may also have some in a rack unit, which are going to be a lot more like, again, what's behind me, where you can pull them in and out like they're in a drawer. They might be on a slider, and you flip them over. So in other words, this thing here, depending on the manufacturer, they can make them so that you can order them so that they stand upright, but the exact same server can also be flipped over down this way, and then it has hardware on the sides, and kind of gives it these rails that can go into a rack unit, like I showed you in that graphic behind me a moment ago. They're usually much, much more expensive, as I was mentioning earlier, but there's a lot of reasons for that, which we'll get into. Most of it's because we have more resources there. They're often without a keyboard or mouse. So again, if I go back to something like this, these servers behind me, nobody ever plugs a mouse or a monitor into probably most computers that you'll see back there, most of those servers. There's other means for accessing them, other methods. So you can remotely connect to them. Not a lot of server administrators will never even put hands on some of these servers. They do it over the network. They might even be in another state or another country when they're working on these servers behind me. Okay, something like that. So they will also often have a higher level of service. So a higher service level agreement, or SLA. So remember, we said a lot of servers are designed to have a 99.999% uptime. But if it does, fail and have some kind of a problem and we're, in a panic, then we want to call somebody. And, with a consumer level technical support, you might call somebody and be on hold for an hour and a half. I've done it. Or you might call somebody and they're supposed to call you back and they don't call you back or email you back for a week or two. With a server, they understand that we are in a panic state with a lot of times with this. And you might have a service level agreement that says we will call you back within 4 hours guaranteed, or a certain period of time guaranteed, or immediate responses. And of course, the higher level of service you want, again, the more expensive that gets. Now, to illustrate some of this, here I've just gone to Dell's website, and you can go there as well. I don't prefer Dell over any other manufacturer. Just happens to be where I am right now, Dell.com. And if we want to take a look at some of the servers, you can kind of just play around with this. Let's go down to servers down here. You see, these are some of the tower ones right here, like I'm showing you. Okay, it stands on its feet, so to speak. And then there's rack servers like we see right here, which flip over sideways. And again, you can slide them in and out of a rack. Let's just play with one of these real quick. Notice how expensive these get. Of course, this one supports up to 4 processors, but remember, there's multiple processors on each die, multiple cores, in other words, and it starts at $79.89. Wow, you can see there's a lot more expensive than what you would often get with a desktop computer. Let's see if we go to one of these. You can see that you can kind of customize these to have as many processors and things as you want. I'm just going to start clicking on stuff to make things really expensive here. I got a couple of processors there already, but I can add even more. These are 2.5 gigahertz processors, but look, they have 20 cores in them. 20! That's what that represents right there. A large cache. They're also turbocharged, if you will. Not like an engine in a car, but they have kind of a turbo that kicks up the processing power even higher during demand times. And look, now I'm up to only $21,000. Oh, but the good news is the shipping is free. So I think you get the idea here. I mean, you can get into some super, super expensive processing here. A little more clicking and I'm up to $44,000. You can add a bunch of memory into these things as well. I can add in 64 gigabyte memory modules here. I don't really know what the max is, but let's say I can add in, clicking the plus button really high here, 20 of memory modules. Look, now I'm up to $81,000. Still free shipping though. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make with all of this is you can add hardware into a server that would never even fit in a desktop computer, or that just would not even be supported in a desktop computer like we would use at home or in a cubicle in an office. These are extremely high-powered, high-capacity, high-performing devices. And we haven't even gotten to storage yet. Remember I mentioned in our last nugget that you could use solid-state drives or SSDs. These don't use spinning platters. But hard drives do use spinning platters. They both serve the same basic purpose, but the SSDs are faster. So once again, I can add in one of these things and again just jack that thing up and add in a whole bunch of them, and now we're up to $86,000. Boy, it's fun if you can spend somebody else's money on that. And by the way, as I scroll down, we haven't even gotten to the operating system yet. That's with no operating system. If we want to add in a Windows server here, the higher level one is another $4,000. Oh, I just had to stop. I was getting too carried away there. Anyway, you can see that the servers are going to be much more higher end in most of those respects. They are also usually centrally located to service multiple clients simultaneously. In other words, you might have dozens, hundreds, even thousands of users all connected to a server at once using its resources. Compare that to a desktop computer where you're usually the only person sitting there accessing that computer. And even if you're in something like a kiosk environment or a library, public library, for example, other people could use that same computer, but not usually 2 or more people at one time on the same computer, okay? So with a server, multiple clients at once can usually access its resources. It's usually backed up in terms of its power with a uninterruptible power supply or a UPS. This means that if the main power goes out, then there's a battery. There's a big, gigantic battery, it might weigh thousands of pounds, that will supply power to that computer and any of the others in the data center. So if this whole data center had a massive power failure with its main power company, then we probably have uninterruptible power supplies, it's kind of a tongue twister, that would continue to power this for a given period of time. These usually appear in a server room, just similar to what I showed you in the background behind me a moment ago. And a few of the different kinds of things that it could supply service for would be things such as mail, like email specifically is what I'm discussing there. DNS, which is domain naming service. And this is how we are able to find things on the internet. So, for example, when I went to Dell's website a moment ago, it's actually not Dell.com. It's actually a number that I go to. But I don't know what that number is. DNS servers kind of have memorized, if you will, which number to go to find Dell.com. A lot of this stuff that I'm about to show you here is kind of beyond where we are right now. But Active Directory, this is where it will store, for example, in a company, my user accounts. So I have a user name, maybe it's J. Conrad or James.Conrad, something like that, and a password, and I have to enter in those two things correctly in order to properly log on. Well, Active Directory is what knows whether I'm entering in that correct username and password. There are other products as well that do the same thing or a similar thing. It might be a file server which has everybody's files on it. That's why I might have some servers that have terabytes and petabytes worth of storage because it's storing files for hundreds or thousands of users all at once. That's a lot more than I'm going to store on my personal computer at home. It might be a database server. We'll talk more about that in our database skill elsewhere in this course. But that might be customer records, products that they've purchased in the past, all of that sort of thing. And then, of course, web servers. It's kind of what runs the world these days. Everything we do, it seems, is on the internet somehow. They might be providing security to my organization, so a lot of times a server will actually be what we call a firewall. So, for example, out here is the big bad internet, where we have sometimes bad guys that are trying to steal things from us, like our credit card information or company secrets. Well, if this is my company right here, I might have one or more servers out here kind of on the edge of my company that are designed to protect me from those inbound internet bad people and block them from accessing things they're not supposed to do. That's a basic description of a firewall, a security appliance is sometimes what we call those types of things as well. It might also be detecting viruses, so maybe it's allowing traffic in, but it's also looking for virus signatures for that inbound traffic. It might be doing at an email level, for example. Lots of different applications that we can use there. And a lot of different other things that I can't even get into quite yet. So that's servers. There's a lot more I could say about servers, not the least of which is data centers like this behind me are super cooled. Even in the middle of the summer, if you go into one of those, you might need to wear a sweater. They keep them really, really cold because they generate a lot of heat. Lots of other details that I could go into there, but I won't for our purposes right now. Stick around for our next nugget where I'll get into some more detail about things such as workstations or desktops, laptops, and other types of devices. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.